Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Wilkerson, and I am the author of Why America Matters, the case for a new exceptionalism. The following video is my voiceover of the introductory chapter with some visual images that go along with it that help tell the story. Check it out. I think you're going to enjoy it. It's a great way to get to know the book and the ideas behind it. It would be really helpful if you watch it. You can like it, leave a comment, let us know what you think, share it with others, trying to decide whether this format and carrying this on with YouTube is something that might make sense for the rest of the book. So take a look, let me know your thoughts, and you can also check it out at whyamericamatters.com. Thanks for watching. Many years ago, as a Gen X 20-something and Rage Against the Machine fan, I would sing along to Testify, a song I recognized as referencing George Orwell's 1984. Rage's catchy lyrics reflected Orwell's idea that whoever controls the present, that is, through the dominant narrative of government-sponsored media, would also control the past and its meaning. The corollary was that whoever controls the retelling of history would also control the future. I vaguely knew that the words had something to do with the link between power, history, memory, and narrative. A clever hook challenged me to check my assumptions about how mainstream media interpret world events and to question the information I was consuming. I probably overprocessed it, but it was a killer song. It was only when I reread 1984 that I recalled the phrase's origin. This was a riff on the ruling party's slogan regarding the mutability of the past, one of its sacred principles. The party, and there is only one, governing Oceania, a fictional superstate constantly at war with one or the other of its two rivals, has three core slogans that every citizen knows by heart. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. 1984 was a favorite meme of conservative Cold War stalwarts as a prophetic warning against the evils of totalitarianism and the communist Soviet Union in particular. As the threat of what President Reagan branded the evil empire receded, so too did the book to the back shelves of the American consciousness. However, 1984 has had a strong popular renewal in the 21st century. Interest returned in 2013 following revelations of massive spying on American citizens by the National Security Agency and other U.S. intelligence organizations. The 2013 sales bump reflected Americans' fear of pervasive government surveillance. This was something we knew was possible but hoped wasn't true, even though we'd been warned by fictions such as the Will Smith and Gene Hackman movie, Enemy of the State, years before. Americans asked the question, are we living in 1984? What would come next? The big surge in the book's popularity followed the 2016 election of Donald J. Trump as president of the United States. By January 2017, 1984 had risen to #1 on Amazon's bestseller list. This was something different. This time, it was the left fueling 1984's renewed success. Now, I use right and left rather than Republicans and Democrats, terms and identities that are losing their meaning. I also want to avoid confusion around the word liberal, which I often use in contrast to illiberal. In this book, liberalism, e.g. democratic liberalism, is akin to American conservatism with a focus on limited government, liberty, individual rights, free markets, republicanism, and representative government. That's a lot to explain every time, so left and right it is. Following the 2016 presidential elections, the media began to warn of the imminent and existential threat that President-elect Trump posed to the American democracy. 1984 was promoted as a key text to understand a totalitarian dictator with nationalist and racist followers. Trump's dystopian view of the condition of America and his unrelenting attacks on its broken institutions greatly frightened the left. When Trump spoke of fake news and his press secretary referred to alternative facts, the critics were sure that they heard the sound of doublespeak, a word not used by Orwell, but rather a conflation of two that were doublethink and newspeak. Doublethink, such as freedom is slavery, is to accept as equal or true two mutually exclusive thoughts or states of being without awareness of the blatant contradiction. The party used it to indoctrinate belief and control reality. Newspeak, on the other hand, eliminated words from the past, along with their meanings and the ideas they represented. Newspeak was a method of thought control through language modification and annihilation of memory. The Trump White House was labeled the Ministry of Truth, accused of aggressively making up its own reality as it went along, to be spun upon an unsuspecting public. A bevy of books on fascism, totalitarianism, the death of democracy, the perils of nationalism, and similar subjects were hastily written and consumed, with Trump written into the narrative as a political Svengali, if not the devil himself. It would take the fake news scandal and deep state deception of the century to recenter the American eye away from Trump and back onto the dangers of the surveillance state and a complicit media. The scandals of Russiagate, the pandemic, a laptop from hell, and evidence of widespread government corruption and conspiracy marked the end of the road for many Americans who had lost all remaining trust in government. The past few years have confirmed that we are now facing the dangers forewarned in 1984. Big Brother, the all-seeing, all-knowing state, has manifest in what Shoshana Zuboff, author of The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, christened Big Other, the ubiquitous presence and power of the surveillance economy embedded in the architecture of AI-enabled big data. Big Other has turned consumers into commodities and reality into whatever these corporations determine it will be. This power appears determined to exercise total control of society by first erasing, then redefining the past. That is, by rewriting history and then shape-shifting culturally shared meaning through modification of language and the meaning of words. The surveillance that this technology enables has supported the political objectives of an elite class that spans our political parties and government bureaucracy, mainstream and social media, and our largest corporations. More worryingly, reality has fallen under the corrupting influence of foreign powers and anti-American ideologies now embedded in our most cherished institutions. This unprecedented power has undermined the free speech rights of Americans enshrined in the First Amendment of the Constitution. This has been done by canceling, censoring, shadow banning, doxing, and downvoting voices of dissent. The most visible and egregious examples have included the suspension of dissenting or nonconformist views from Facebook and Twitter, big tech's collusive attacks on its competitors, media blackouts of investigative stories that run against the mainstream narrative, and the censoring of important free speech issues such as origins of the pandemic, voting integrity, corruption involving government officials and their families, and the potential long-term risks of an experimental vaccine. The application of thought and behavior control is happening in subtle and long-lasting ways, such as by redefining American history, removing its cultural icons, altering or inverting the basic meaning of words, for example, justice, equity, racism, and truth, and creating false narratives of conflict between Americans based on the identity politics of race, gender, and sexual orientation. By falsifying memory and by emptying the meaning of words only to refill them with ideologically laden opposites, the progressive left is well on its way to transforming the identity and meaning of the nation into something unrecognizable and alien. In 2020, America was confronted with multiple overlapping crises. This revealed a near bankruptcy in the vault of American ideals that might have otherwise provided defensive support in times of challenge. Many Americans, especially younger generations, are now asking fundamental questions about whether the entire American experiment isn't a failure and whether perhaps we might not be better off starting over with something new. Usually the something new is a rebranded version of something old and failed elsewhere. But without adequate historical memory and context, this detail is lost on the audience. The result of this upheaval is that many Americans now feel confused, lost, alienated, and unsure about their own identity and that of their nation. In the face of an unrelenting and often unrecognized attack, America is undergoing multiple crises of circumstances, identity, institutions, and engagement that, when taken together, threaten to undermine and tear apart the republic. It was the pandemic and its unintended consequences that first revealed many of these issues, but they were there all along. Why America Matters argues that because of the multitude of crises we face and the social disintegration that has already begun in our nation, America faces a critical choice. Either we ignore the rapidly accumulating warning signs, abandon our cherished ideals and national identity, and find ourselves drifting further and further into socialism, authoritarianism, and inevitable tyranny, or we strongly resist the forces conspiring against America and fight for the restoration of our identity, strength, and integrity as a nation. This may require remodeling of old ideas, institutions, and national distinctives, but in many cases will require renovation and, in some cases, completely reinventing new features built to suit the 21st century's challenges. Nothing in our current situation will allow for a simplistic return to the past, whatever the well-intended traditionalist might mean by that. If we don't make real change, the increasing pressure from America's foreign adversaries and the slow drip of ideological poison and cultural rot will conspire to hasten our nation's political and economic decline. This will likely come through a shift towards an authoritarian regime, whether socialist or merely statist, one in which individual freedoms are increasingly lost to the surveillance state. This is already happening. As the economy weakens through inflationary policies and effective political power disintegrates, over time, the state itself will be brought under the puppeteer's hand of foreign influence and control. China, manipulating from behind the scenes the levers of our institutions and markets, will set the tune and require us to dance. Our middle class will slip into poverty and despair. Identity politics will keep us at one another's throats. American leadership will become increasingly irrelevant globally, as the dollar-based financial system can no longer maintain its coercive power. This is not an outcome that any of us should easily accept, but it is a possibility that we can no longer ignore. America needs a reimagining of itself. A new American exceptionalism is required if we hope to emerge from the season of crisis with renewed vision and purpose as a nation. Like America herself and the new government established at its founding, a 21st century American Renaissance will require an invention, the creation of something that hasn't existed before. And it will require that Americans manage to agree on and unite behind a 21st century vision of American purpose and, yes, greatness. So long as we remain so deeply divided on ideological, political, and cultural grounds, it is difficult to see how this can happen. Why America Matters explores how it might be possible to create a better American future, not by abandoning our past, but by integrating the best of our shared history, values, culture, and ideals into a new model of America built to suit for the 21st century. What is suggested is not the traditionalists' sentimental and nostalgic call to go back to the good old days. This is simply not possible. A new century requires a new model.